So I'm a 60-year-old musician, professional musician, arranger, orchestrator with a career as an orchestrator, and I am just utterly obsessed with guitar. I mean, my wife Alita will will tell you, like, it's pretty much all I think about when I'm not working. What I want to talk about today, and anyone who knows me or has been following me on social media may have seen me recently posting about guitar, which is in the last 6 or 8 months or so become a kind of an obsession for me, as my wife will tell you. So I wanted to talk about guitar and me and orchestration and where this obsession with guitar came from and why I now have a studio full of guitars and guitar gear, and I practice every day and have become obsessed with guitar. So let's talk about this. So I'm not a guitarist. When I was growing up, I was a pianist first, and then when I was in elementary school, I began studying the French horn, really because I wanted to play in band and orchestra in my elementary school with my friends. I thought it was really cool, and became kind of a serious horn player in high school, and in fact got into it was really a dual program at the Eastman School of Music and the University of Rochester as a horn player. My major was history and theory, but horn was my primary instrument. And I did study some piano while I was at Eastman too. I had a wonderful teacher there. But going back to high school, I played in some bands in high school. And when we were teenagers, at the time where kids were starting to discover their love for instruments and that sort of thing, people knew that I was a keyboard player and a pianist. And so I started to get invited to play with different groups of students, many of whom were guitarists. And in fact, I remember one day in my early teenage years, I was probably in, well, we called it junior high, but middle school. I was invited over to some kids' house. I couldn't remember their name. And because they were guitarists and I think they just wanted to hang out with me. And I remember them asking me what music I listened to. And specifically, I remember them saying, "Do you listen to Leonard Skinner?" And I didn't know who Leonard Skinner was. And I was like, "Who's he?" But I always regretted that I was embarrassed not knowing. So I didn't say, like, "Who's Leonard Skinner?" Like, show me, play me some stuff. I did later in high school. But all of that kind of rattled around in my head as an adult. And, back in the day, and I grew up in the 70s, my first love was rock. The first albums I bought for myself were the Beatles, and then really the first kind of popular music of the day, like a current hit album that I bought, was Fleetwood Mac Rumors. That was my first purchase with my own allowance money of an album, which would have been around 1976. So I would have been in 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere around there. And Queen, I bought a lot of Queen albums. My friends and I loved Bohemian Rhapsody. We were trying to figure that song out from like when it first came out. And so I loved that kind of music. And when I played in bands, I was a keyboard player, but I always had a lot of admiration for the guitarists in the band. But I just sort of took it for granted. They played guitar, I played piano, and it never really, I didn't have a lot of curiosity about like what were guitar lessons like and what kind of guitar were they playing and that sort of thing. Anyway, flash forward to about 20 years ago in the early 2000s, and I decided one day that I was going to get myself a guitar and start playing and taking lessons. And I did. For about 5 years or so in the early 2000s, I played guitar. And I loved it. I loved playing. I really started more acoustically in that phase of things. And in fact, I had a beautiful Martin guitar. But what happened was I developed tendonitis in my hands. I just think my technique wasn't good, and I had to stop. I had triggers on my fingers, and in fact, it was really bad. I needed surgery. So I stopped playing, and my two older kids were very, very interested in guitar, my son Max and my daughter Carly. And eventually I just kind of gave them all my gear because it was just sitting there. I gave Carly my Martin, which I'm so glad she has. It was a beautiful jumbo. And So other than not a beater guitar, but an inexpensive six-string steel string, which I still have in LA. I didn't have any of those guitars before. I mean, anymore. And anyway, earlier this year, now it's the end of October of 2025, but earlier in the year, I'd been very, very busy for a few years, and I sort of got to the end of this kind of slate of projects I was working on. And I breathed a sigh of relief, and I said, well, I don't know, what am I going to do with my time now that I'm not as busy? And guitar popped into my head again, and on a whim, I went on Reverb, and I bought myself an inexpensive Squier Strat, and an amp and a couple of pedals, and I started playing again and just got bitten by the bug, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So I started to play, and I really concentrated a little bit more on my technique, and I started with electric this time, and luckily my hands have been taking to guitar. I still having a little stiffness in one of my fingers, but I'm also 60 years old. So I'm a 60-year-old musician, professional musician, arranger, orchestrator with a career as an orchestrator, and I'm learning guitar. Now here we are. I started March maybe, and now it's October, and I am just utterly obsessed with guitar. I mean, my wife Alita will will tell you, like, it's pretty much all I think about when I'm not working. So what am I obsessed about, and what are my takeaways thus far? Here's the main thing for me. Guitarists, I had no idea, and I apologize to every guitarist I've ever worked with because I didn't understand. And this really opens up a huge, huge area for me, particularly in musicals. But on the recordings, I do too. Ready? It's one word. Tone. Tone. Guitar, tone. So guitar is all about your tone, all about your tone. And again, I'm not saying anything that guitarists don't know, but arrangers and orchestrators might not realize this if you haven't done a deep dive into guitar, particularly guitar. Of course, it's this way on any solo instrument, woodwind, string, brass, your tone. But guitar has this electronic relationship between your hands, your strings, what gauge strings you use, the electronics of the guitar, your pickups, the kind of pickups you have, how that moves through the wires, the guitar cables, through maybe a pedal board, a collection of pedals that you might acquire, or like a head rush or a fractal or something like that, into your amp. Amps. Who knew? Into your amp, maybe through an effects loop, and then into your, wait for this, speaker. Because how do you hear guitar? You hear it through a speaker. What kind of speaker is it? What is it made of? How many speakers are there in the cabinet? Why do you choose that cabinet, that kind of speaker, the wattage that they can handle? This is all part of guitar tone and guitar playing that I knew nothing about. I mean, nothing about. And I have had guitar amps over the years and thought about miking them for recordings and that sort of thing, and sometimes have. I also have Pro Tools behind me, and I have a collection of amp sims and that sort of thing. But I never understood any of it, really. And as I started this second wave of interest in guitar, this hobby, this last year, and I started, when I first started, as soon as I could get around a little bit on the guitar, I wanted to record myself because that's the fun part. I want to hear. And boy, recording yourself, that's when you know how much you stink, because it's one thing to be noodling around on your guitar, but when the click track starts and you get that red light fever, and it's like, boy, that sounds terrible. But then sometimes it sounds good. It's like my dad used to joke around about golf. Like, why do you, like, we're all terrible at golf, but then one time you hit a shot like Arnold Palmer and you're like, oh my God, that ball just, I could be a golfer, So it's like that with guitar. Every now and then you play something and it sounds really good. But I noticed that I didn't really like the sound of what I was playing. And I would try these different amp sims and that sort of thing. But because I didn't understand, it starts in your hands. It's how you set your tone and your volume controls on your guitar, your pickup switching, depending on the guitar you have. And that's another thing. Depending on the guitar you have, there's this world of different kinds of guitars. Like I had no idea. I knew what they were. I knew what a Les Paul was. I knew what a Strat was. I knew what a Telecaster was, but I thought I didn't like them. Oh no, I like Telecasters. This whole world, and we're going to get into all this. I'm going to get into this as an arranger, but now I'm just doing this overview. So I asked myself the question, why don't I like my tone? And then I started to, and I'm a very basic beginner guitarist. I don't like my tone because, let's face it, I still suck. But also because I didn't understand what makes the tone of a guitar. So I started to do more of a deeper dive. And then it was like, the floodgates opened. I dropped into the bottomless abyss of guitar knowledge, and I love you guitarists. I mean, I just got to tell you, I love you all. Your obsession with all of this just really speaks to me. It really speaks to me. I could go down the rabbit hole with you. That's what word I was looking for, the rabbit hole. I could go down the rabbit hole with you all day and all night. But now I'm starting my baby guitarist journey of understanding why you're all obsessed with your guitars and your tone, and how much fun it is to explore that with this instrument in your hands. And when you discover those shadings of sound, and you hear it coming back at you out of your speaker or in your headphones, whatever it may be in your case, it's really thrilling. And to me, it somehow hits me in that same place that sitting in front of a band or an orchestra does when I've written the arrangement. The sound's coming back at me, and I'm like, yes, that texture, I heard that, I thought of it, and now people are playing it, and I'm getting it back, and boy, it's a lot to take in, but there's a particular satisfaction in that if you're an arranger or orchestrator, and you know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit of a drug, you get bitten by that, and you like, I have to have more of that, and so that we love that. And so your guitar chain, like I'm getting it back from this guitar in a way that I never did really from piano. I mean, maybe at the beginning I did, but it just wasn't, never felt it viscerally this way on piano or even synths the way I am with guitar. So that's a little bit about my guitar journey as an orchestrator. Has it influenced my writing? I would say yes. And I would love to do a deeper dive into that as well. Why it's changed the way I think about guitar and will think about guitar. And then particularly, I'd like to talk about guitar tone as it relates to musical theater. And I alluded to this earlier, but I feel like guitarists in particular are shortchanged in musical theater because we never, ever have the time to let them build the tone they want to build and then hear it in the house. You have no idea how your guitar sounds out there, and you should know. We need to be your partner in this. And so anyway, Arrival Arts is going to take this on, particularly guitarists, bassists, drummers too. You should be hearing the tone of your instruments in the house. I suppose really all instrumentalists, if you want to, but rhythm section in particular, I feel like we do a pretty good job of capturing the tone of most acoustic instruments in the pit. We have great sound designers working on Broadway. What we don't have is a lot of time, but we have great talent. And we do a pretty good job, drums too, but we struggle with bass and guitar. And I think there's a better way to do it. Anyway, was a big takeaway for me in all of this. Anyway, let me know what you thought of this. This is a new area for me. Are you interested? Give me some feedback. Be nice. And we'll do more of these. I've enjoyed this, and I hope you have too. Anyway, this is Doug Besterman here at Studio Origin in New York City, in the Soho neighborhood of New York City. Thank you if you've listened this far. I'm supposed to say like and subscribe, but do or don't. It's up to you. If I like someone, I'm going to like them, and if I want to subscribe, I'm going to want to subscribe. So you will or won't. Anyway, if you do, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time, and thank you so much. Be good, and more soon.